Hello everyone. Today we are going to start with the current affairs discussion. And today being the 15th December 2021, we are going to start the discussion of the current affairs. The language for the discussion is going to be in English and Hindi as well. And another point I would like to make here, this current affairs is going to be a little lengthy so that it is not just a mere collection of the facts. Uh, Precisely, it is done so that we understand the current affairs in entirety and we don't just collect the facts. So, first news we have got today is related to Char Dham, and this will be useful in paper GS paper one, where the art and culture subject is covered. Recently, Supreme Court it gave a order or it allowed that the highway which passes through the Char Dham should be widened to 10 meters, and before it was 5.5 meters. So this was 5.5 meters. This was allowed by Supreme Court in 2018, and now it has been allowed to widen the road highways to 10 meters. Now, exactly, let's see what the Supreme Court has said. Okay, actually, what the statement above is said by the Supreme Court only, that it has to be widened 10 meters. And apart from that one, what we see here, that these highways, they are very strategically, they are very important as they connect to the border of China. So that is one of the reasons why the Supreme Court has allowed to widen it to 10 meters. And at the same time, it is also very important for the environmental concern as well. And Supreme Court also ordered that there has to be a oversight committee, and it will be led by the Supreme Court Judge A.K. Sikri, so that the committee ensures that works are executed in an environmentally conscious manner. They don't violate any environmental uh, concerns. Now let us see what are the developments so far which has been taking place in Char Dham project. Okay, basically this project was started in 2016 by Narendra Modi, and but what happened? So many issues came after that. After the inauguration of the project, some petitioners they challenged in the court because of its irregularities. They said that environmental clearance had not been taken for the project, and the normal existing norms are not followed by the project. And what we see in 2018, uh, NGT gave the clearance, but again the petition was filed saying that this is not the same bench which had heard the case, and the clearance is given by the another team or the another bench of NGT. And Supreme Court stayed on the order in 2018, and in September 2020, what happened? A writ petition was also filed stating that the highway for the Char Dham project should not be exceed 5.5 meter, in which, as prescribed in 2018 circular of the Union Road Transport Ministry. But the Defense Ministry, it asked that it needs some kind of modification as it wants to increase the width of the road. And so Supreme Court asked the high powered committee to look into the matter and see what can be the alternative solution. And here HPC high powered committee, it said that because the road is strategically very important, so it has to be widened 10 meters. And another reasons what the HPC gave, that it's not feasible to revisit those stretches where the work has been already initiated or started. So where the work has been started, it cannot be undone there. So entire road has to be widened 10 meters. And now there are some arguments for widening of the road, and some another type of environmental concerns are also there. So those people who argue for seeking 10-meter width. What they say that because these highways are very important strategically, and they have to carry heavy vehicles of military machineries, weapons, missiles, tank, troops. So these roads or highways have to be 10 meters width. And there are also some people, those who argue against that one, taking into environmental concern. They say that when in the hilly terrains, if there is a large scale construction being done, then these areas are recipe for disaster. The disaster like landslides may take place, so it is not a good thing to carry out such kind of construction in the hilly terrains. And another point which they say that this project was being done by bypassing the mandatory environmental clearance and environmental impact assessment procedure. So they did not take into account these procedures. So this was also the violation of the this environmental clearance. And what we see there, over 25,000 trees were cut down. So this is also very sensitive things for the ecologically point of view. So these are, some kind of the environmental concerns which people cite. Okay. And fourth thing, what they say that is, if these highways are being constructed, there has to be excavation, blasting, so much work has to be done because they want to make a all-weather highway. So such kind of area where such constructions are being done, so this may seem to be harmful in the future. And now let us see what this Char Dham project is. It involves developing and widening 900-kilometer national highways which are connecting to the Hindu pilgrimages areas, specifically this Badrinath, Kedarnath, Gangotri and Yamunotri. And this project is being carried out at the cost of 12,000 crores. So this was okay news. Next we have got news related to the women judges. Okay, so recently what happened, Chief Justice of India M.V. Raman, he promised to take up the issue of the underrepresentation of women in the judicial system. What is the condition of the women in the judiciary? You see, in the 71 years of time, only 8 women judges have been there. Okay, so this is a very pathetic condition. And the first judge was Justice Fatima Devi. And this Justice Fatima Devi, she was raised to the level of this bench after the gap of 39 years after the establishment of Supreme Court. So it had been a long time when the first women justice came. And right now in the High Court and the Supreme Court, altogether we have got 1,113 judges sanctioned, but the women judges who are actually working are only 80. So this is not a good scenario. And there are some high courts like Manipur, Meghalaya, Patna, Tripura, Telangana, and Uttarakhand, where there is not even a single women representatives in the judicial system as a judge. Now let us see their benefits of diversity and gender representation in the Supreme Court. What advantage or benefit it will have? First thing, it will be a positive step in the direction of judiciary, as it is perceived to be being transparent, inclusive, and representative. So when it's inclusive, even the women also have to be included as judges. And second thing, what we see that women judges, okay, because of their presence itself will enhance the legitimacy of the court. And third thing, what we see, even the quality of the decision making will improve, as the women judges will be very sensitive towards the gender issues or gender related issues which come to the court. And this will be a kind of it will go a long way towards a more balanced and empathic approach in cases where the sexual violence, or as I said earlier, that women related issues will be dealt very sensitively by the women judges. But some challenges may also arise here. like some challenges are there to the entry of the women to the judiciary. First of all, the eligibility criteria, which is uh, which is which has to through which they have to enter into judiciary. That is, lawyers they have to wait for 7 years of continuous practice, and that means uh, all those who come to the eligible as a eligible candidate, their age is has to be 35 to 40 years, and by the time what happens, most of the women they already get married, so their chance of getting into the judiciary system as a judge is ended there. Second thing, what we see, long and flexible work hours in the law. They have to work there for long hours. At the same time, women have to take up the responsibility in the family. So because of this, what happened? They sometimes are not able to continue this profession. Okay, so this was a news, or there's some points which can be useful for the mains point of view as well as at the prelims point of view. And we have got, this another news related to the Public Accounts Committee. Recently, the centennial celebration, that means the 100 years of completion of the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee was held. So about this, okay, let us see about the PAC, Public Accounts Committee. So it is formed every year, and the strength of the Public Account Committee is 22 members, out of which 15 are from Lok Sabha and 7 are from Rajya Sabha. And their tenure is only for 1 year. And the chairman, uh, who is appointed by the Lok Sabha Speaker, is generally from the opposition party. And this practice has been continuing from 1967 onwards. And the very chief function of the PSC is to examine the audit report of the CAG after it is laid in the parliament. So this is the only kind of responsibility which they have. Now let us see what are the limitations of this Public Accounts Committee. You see, this Public Accounts Committee has no role other than just examining the report which is laid down by the CAG. So they cannot intervene in the question of the policy. And you see, they cannot even stop also the expenditure. They can only they can tab over the expenditure which has been already occurred, but they don't have the power to limit the expenses. And even the day-to-day expenditure of the administration of the government can't be intervened by the PLC. That is the another kind of disadvantages or the limitation it has. Another thing what we see that any recommendation which is made by PSC is only in advisory in nature. That means the ministry may accept or may not accept. Most of the time it is not accepted. And what we see, it is not vested with the power of disallowance of expenditure by the department. It means they cannot disallow. Okay, they don't have that power. They don't have the authority to disallow any uh, expenditure when it is being occurred. Okay, so these are some of the limitations, and related to this, some questions can be also rise, like what are the parliamentary standing committee, why they are necessary, discuss their role and functions to bring out their significance. So these questions can be framed as it is related to this. Next, we have a news related to Indo-Pacific, which is a GS paper 2 topic. And in India and its neighborhood relation, this can be covered there. So recently, what happened? The U.S. Secretary of the State, who is Antony Blinken, so he said that United States will expand its military and the economic relationship with the Asian countries, so that it is able to counter the increasing power of China in Indo-Pacific. So US is feeling the necessity to counter the growing power of China, especially in the Indo-Pacific Ocean. Now, what is this Indo-Pacific Ocean? Okay, it is a idea of this Indo-Pacific is a very kind of single strategic space, which is a natural growth because of the growing influence of China in Indian Ocean or in Indian Ocean region. After that, let us see the significance of this Indo-Pacific region. First of all, it's this region is very like important or essential to maintain the regional stability. If the regional stability has to be maintained, so this area has to be properly surveillanced and at the same time protected so that no particular country has the dominating power over here. And second thing, what we see that a strong relationship with the US are seen as a very important tool or method if the India's strategic posture. So if India has to, have a very strategic posture or position, so its relation with US is very important. So that is another importance of the Indo-Pacific region. And even in the long-term interest of the Indian Ocean nations, having a very strategic ways or methods to deal with the issues there is very important. That is another importance. Even when we talk about in terms of trade and military, this region is very important for most of the nations. And for adhering to freedom of navigation, adherence to rule-based order and stable trade environment. If the countries, they need to have a very rule-based or the stable trade environment, stability of this particular region has to be maintained. And for sea and the air lanes, connectivity and affording international rules and norms. Even for the like sea and the air lanes, connectivity and other countries, rules, regulation norms, if they have to maintain, this area is very important. So, because of these points, this Indo-Pacific region has been very important. Now let us see what is the role and implications for India in the Indo-Pacific region. See, Indo-Pacific region, it's national from the national security point of view is very important as most populous nation is one side and economically dynamic part of the world that is US in the other side. So, it makes India to have a better relation with the US if this particular region has to be maintained or surveillanced properly. Another thing what we see here, India has been always the country which is which has aim to have or which has aim at the same time advocating that concept of Indo-Pacific strategy. Some policy should be there so that the proper discipline is maintained in this particular region. With opening of economy, India has been connecting with the Indian Ocean neighbors and major maritime powers of the world. So, in this point of view, also this is also very important for India. Next, we have got the news of co-lending model bank NBFC co-lending. So, actually, what is this? Now, the bank will tie up with the NBFCs, non-banking financial institution, so that they come together and they can lend the credit to the priority sector, to the sector which has declined, sorry, not declined, which has been not under the umbrella of the credit system for a long time. So in the September 2018, RBI had permitted that co-lending with all the registered NBFCs are allowed. So following this one, what happened? So many banks and the NBFCs, they have tied together so that they can lend the credit. Now, as I said, what is co-lending? Co-lending means it is a joint contribution of credit or loan, both by the lender at the same time also sharing of the risk and the reward. So bank and the NBFCs, they come together and they tie up, and together they lend, especially to the priority sectors lending. What is the aim of this one? Aim is to flow of credit to the unserved and under-deserved sector of the economy. So because under-reserved sector, these are the sectors which are mostly not covered by the main streams of the banking. So with this system, it helps them. Now, what are the challenges actually related to this? One of the major challenges what we see is that unusual tie-up with the corporate has begun here. For instance, SBI signed a deal with Adani Capital, which is a very small NBFC, for lending farmers so that they can buy the tractors and the other implements. So unusual how the corporate systems will enter into the banking system, that can be seen. Now, another risk, what we can see, there is a greater risk to the banking sector, because NBFC, they have to retain the only 20% of the risk, and the 80% of the risk of the credit has to be borne by the bank in case of default. So if if the loan is defaulted, then the banking sector will be majorly responsible for that. And what we see that corporates in the banking system. So directly RBI has not allowed the banking sector in the uh, RBI has not allowed the corporates in the banking sector, but most of the NBFCs are the part of the corporate houses only. So this is also a cause of concern. And what is the significance of this model? Okay, significance is very simple. Lower cost of fund will be fund from the bank, and the greater reach of the NBFC will help so that the beneficiaries, they can get the credit at a very affordable cost. It will also help the bank to expand their customer base and enable them to provide the last mean banking services. Even to the rural areas, such kind of services can be provided. Okay, so this was a news about the uh, co-lending model, bank and BFC's co-lending. Now let us see another news, which is the Unlawful Activities Act, which is part of GS paper 3. What happened here now, recently the information from the Union Home Ministry was put in the Lok Sabha, which says that nearly 57% of those people who are arrested in the country under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act in 2018 and 20 are the people who are below 30 years of age. And especially in that, highest number of people who got arrested are from Uttar Pradesh, 931. And in that, 70% of the total arrest in UP under this UAPA are below the 30 years of age. So let us see about this, what this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is. So this act was passed in 1967, and basically the aim of this act is to prevent the unlawful activities which is associated in India. And this act gives the central power, absolute power it gives to the central government, so that if the central government looks or observes any kind of unlawful activity happening, so it can declare it that it is a unlawful activity. And the provisions for the punishment is even the death penalty, and even the life imprisonment is also there. Now, some of the key points from this act is what that under this act, both Indians and the foreign nations can be also charged. It's not just limited to Indians. And if the crime is committed outside India in the foreign land, they can be also charged with this. And during this time, investigation agency can file a charge sheet in maximum 180 days after the arrest, and this duration can be also extended. So this is the another information we need to keep in mind. But amendment was made in 2019 in this act, and now what happened in this act, some of the changes which were made here, that This act empowers or gives power to the general director general to grant approval to take the property or seize the property of the person who is being investigated. So the person's property can be seized, okay, during the process of investigation. Another changes which has been made here is what the act empowers officers of National Investigation Agency of rank of inspector or above to investigate the cases of terrorism. So not below that rank will be allowed to conduct it. It also includes the provisions of the designating an individual as a terrorist. अगर कोई टेररिस्ट अकेला भी है तो उसको भी टेररिस्ट घोषित किया जा सकता है. So do you agree that the Unlawful Activity Prevention Act could prove catastrophic for fundamental rights? Is sacrificing liberty for national security justified? Discuss and provide your opinion. So this is kind of main uh, questions which can be framed in this way. Now we have got certain facts for the prelims. Okay, we have got here Konyak Nagas. Now this what happened, this there is a Konyak Union, apex body, highest body of the Konyak tribe, okay, which basically resides in the Nagaland Mon district. And recently what happened, some 14 civilians were killed in Oting village. And because of that one, this particular union, Konyak Union, they declared their non-cooperation with the armed forces in the Konyak soil. So they will not support the this armed forces there. Now let us know about this Konyak Nagas. Okay, these are the largest of the Naga tribes. So many tribes are there in that they are the largest one. And basically they reside, okay, they inhabit the Mon district, one of the district in the Nagaland, Mon district. So there they reside. And this land is called the land of Angas. Okay. Angas and Wangas, they are the traditional chief whom people respect a lot. And you see, they have the facial tattoos were earned for taking the enemy's head. So if they killed the enemy, so they would make it tattoos in the face. So that can be seen there. Another unique traditional practices which they involve is like gunsmithing, ironsmithing, brass works, and the gunpowder making. They also do such kind of activities. And some festivals they have like Ayoling, a festival celebrated in the first week of April. So this festival is celebrated by them. Okay, and they also have another festival called Lau Ongmo. So this is a traditional harvest festival celebrated in the months of August or September. Okay, so this is about the Konyak Nagas. The next we have got Miss Universe 2021. So the Chandigarh's Harnaj Sandhu, she has received the 70th Miss Universe title, which was held in Israel in December 13, 2021. Now, why this news is important? Because India got the title of Miss Universe after 21 years. Before that, in 1994, it was given to Susmita Sen, and in the year 2000, it was given to Lara Datta. So this is also important. So we are done for the discussion today. Let us just revise in a glance, then we wind up with the discussion. So Char Dham, so news related to that, it is given, it has been widened 10 meters. Supreme Court has allowed to widen the highways to 10 meters. And we had issues related with that. Then we saw the news related to the representation of women judges in the judiciary. After that, we saw about the PSC because it celebrated the centennial celebration recently, which had taken place. Then we discussed about the Indo-Pacific region and how it is important for the world and for India. Then we saw about the co-lending model or banking NBFC's co-lending model, what problems it may face. And then we saw about this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. and we saw the tribe prelims specific data here, that is Konyak Nagas and Miss Universe 2021. So we are done for today. Have a nice day. We'll see you tomorrow.